Welcome to Conversations on NHX. I'm Suresh Kochatill. Russia faced an audacious attack from Ukraine a few days ago. Drones, which were wheeled into Russia on trucks parked next to their Air Force bases housing the nuclear bombers, simply took out and wiped them all. We don't know the exact numbers. Ukraine claimed 41 have been taken out, which means half of Russia's nuclear bomb fleet is gone. But Russia said not many. So we assume we'll discount that number to 1/3 of it. But still, that's a huge damage. Drones, which cost hardly about $2,000 to $3,000, have destroyed aircrafts worth hundreds of millions of dollars and difficult to make these days, especially for Russia. But what is this war teaching us? We all assume that when the Ukraine-Russia war started, Russia would just simply steamroll over Ukraine in a matter of days and the war would be over. 3.5 years later, we still don't have a winner or a loser. To discuss this and more, we have with us Colonel V.V. Rao, retired, who has seen action in Jammu Kashmir extensively. And today is perhaps the right man to talk to us about the changing facets of war. Welcome to the show, sir.
Yes.
Colonel Rao, to put it in a very simple manner, we saw what happened in the 4-day skirmish between India and Pakistan. Day one, we hit their terror bases.
Yes.
Obviously, we would have used missiles and we would have fired it from the aircraft or maybe even from the ground. Day two, Pakistan retaliated. We stopped their drones and other missiles. Day three, we hit them again and we hit them extensively. Now, just yesterday comes another report saying there are 7 more places which we didn't mention, which
Yes.
Pakistan is claiming that we have hit. We have hit. So that's like a bonus. But my question is not that, Colonel. What is more worrying is that we saw these drones coming from Pakistan, which are air defense systems took out wonderfully well. And in the words of General Wig, if Thomo can't, Lily can. The Australian fast bowler duo being talked about there. But if you look at that, in tomorrow's scenario, as a veteran, when you were out of NDA or you were out of going to Wellington or even College of Defense Management here in Hyderabad, what should tomorrow's generals, tomorrow's air marshals and tomorrow's admirals be taught in war scenario? Has the war, as we name it, technically changed?
Yes, certainly it has changed over the last 3-4 decades. The drones technology, which was incipient earlier, it has developed rapidly. Earlier, the Americans were making large-sized drones, basically for high altitude, long endurance, and long-range variety, with the weapon load carrying capacity to destroy the targets if possible. But now there is another type which is being used, that is the commercial drones, which are available at very cheap prices, almost $500 or even lower than that. That is 32,000 to 40,000 rupees. These drones are good enough for surveillance. They have got limited endurance, limited range, and limited height also. They can be easily knocked off by the enemy machine gun fire too. But then sending swarms, 400, 500, and there are reports of up to 1,200, whether it is in Ukraine-Russo war or Indo-Pak war, Indo-Pak skirmish, which we shall call it. The thing is phenomenal. Of course, we have countered that by Bhargavastra, where we have got weapons exclusively to target drones, laser-fired guns, which can destroy the drones. As you said, there are drones which have varying capacity, right from small surveillance, video surveillance, oblique photo recce, with limited range, to ranging to M9 Reaper, which can go 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers inside the enemy territory, stay at 30,000, 40,000, or even 60,000 altitude for almost 18 to 24 hours non-stop, and keep relaying the complete data. Now, how to distinguish between these two is the technology is yet to answer.
That's exactly my question, where I was coming to the next point, because what we saw in the Pakistan-India skirmish, the 4-day skirmish, was they were using Turkish drones, which we know has been used in Azerbaijan versus Armenia. It's been used to a certain extent even in the Ukraine-Russia war. Now, the point is very simple, Colonel, is in a traditional war, which is fought, we see tanks, we see infantry, and we see the mechanized columns, we see howitzers, but here, nothing of that sort. You are getting small drones, which, as you described, costing about $1,000, $2,000, knocking out extensively big aircraft without any problem. So if you talk, India took out those drones, okay? Now the obvious question was, why couldn't Russia do it? Okay, that had a lot of planning in which they're surprised. We never knew that they could be carried on top of a truck, and then the truck top door could be opened remotely by somebody sitting hundreds of kilometers away, and then fire those drones also, which is admirable. I believe what Zelensky is saying, that it took 1.5 years to plan. But my question was to the same point again, Colonel. Should we invest in infantry? Should we invest in tanks? Should we buy more expensive aircraft? Or should we concentrate more on building drone technology? I know we need all of this, maybe. Or maybe we need to spend a bit more on drone and drone-related technologies.
I think your latter phrase, invest more in drone technology and a counter-drone technology, that goes more apt. Mainly because drones cannot hold ground. I have seen drones operating in CI area. Twice I requisitioned. But the amount of intelligence which we could gather for counter-terrorist operations was very minimal.
That is because you are operating in forest areas.
Forest areas and mountain areas. And people could be stuck up in caves, behind boulders, villages, jungles. Everything is possible. So it was not really helpful in counter-terrorist operations. In fact, the very fact that counter-terrorist operations are still going on against the Pahalgam incident itself says so. Now, if you look at the other objectives which Ukraine has achieved of late, these are all large targets, fixed targets which are available on ground for over a period of years. You can translate it into airfields, ammunition depots, supply depots, logistics installations, and all that. Yes, tanks to some extent, loitering ammunition, small drones carrying explosive, we're going to the area, battlefield area, and looking for acquiring a target, and then using that explosive to demolish the and using AI technology to find out which is the most vulnerable place. Like there is a report that this Tu-95 aircraft were damaged by exactly impinging upon the fuselage/wing junction points.
Yeah, I saw the drones going exactly so that they couldn't be repaired again.
They cannot be repaired. Now, the Russia says only 13 aircraft have been damaged fully. Remainder, yes, they are all repairable. That means we take it as somewhere around a dozen aircraft totally destroyed.
But that itself is a big number, isn't it?
Big number, Colonel? Yes. And the delivery means
they are nuclear bombers.
Nuclear bombers, long-range bombers.
They are not small fighter aircraft.
And they are capable of carrying more than 3,000 kg to 5,000 kg payloads, that is large missiles, which they can fire. But certainly what happens is, Ukraine, Russia, the game ball is entirely different. Ukraine is only a front of NATO. In fact, it is the NATO-Russia skirmishes which are going on without crossing the threshold level for a world war. So it is a limited world war which is taking place. So we must see in that context. Now the second context which we have to see this Ukraine-Russia one is, Ukraine is a small country, but it had the trained manpower because erstwhile USSR, all defense systems used to be manufactured in Ukraine only. Yes. So they had all the technology plus the trained manpower, so that they could utilize and quickly absorb the technology which was given by the Western countries. And probably Turkey has helped them with these smaller drones. May not have used the Barkatia drones, but the smaller ones certainly probably came from Turkey only. and the technology seems to have been transferred to Ukraine. That is why they are saying we will manufacture as much as 4.5 million drones over a year. But certainly they have not altered the ground base at Donbass, neither Zaporizhia nor Crimea. Unless that is done, neither Ukraine is going to win, nor Russia is going to make a.
So after 3.5 years, there's no result.
There is no result.
But technically, Colonel, correct me if I'm wrong, Ukraine doesn't have an air force of its own. It has a few aircraft donated by some countries. It has pilots who are not that highly trained because they gave up the nuclear option when they got divided from Russia. To be a member of NATO, they even wanted to get rid of that. The point is, when your air force is weak, and I'm not looking at a Pakistan-India scenario, we can take even Hamas for that matter. LTT, when they were there, they of course didn't have drones, but they tried manufacturing some aircraft, small ones. My point is, should we still keep spending on fancy F-35s? I know we need a deterrent, we need a few aircraft. But do you think the time has come, and we spoke about this in terms of the futuristic technology, not just drones, by the way? Are there other technologies that we need to start looking at? And the war doctrine, as I said, which are taught in army colleges, need to be changed.
Yes, certainly. Now, coming to this other question, the change in the doctrine, now we have to use space more and more rather than the ground forces. Earlier, what was happening is everything was based on ground movement or sea movement, basically sticking to the earth surface. Now that aerial warfare, whether it is drones, aircraft, or even the space, by virtue of satellites giving you communication and command controls, then navigation, precision bombing, then for cartography and photography, even they can provide real-time imagery. And of course, the third thing is their communication, which Starlinks. Now the Starlinks is going to come to India, and that is going to be again another biggest danger.
Headache.
Biggest danger, because people will invest in it, terrorist groups, and while it is possible to intercept the communications, it is not cost effective. And there might be some communications which could be going missing, which we will not be able to intercept. So leaving all that, in the Indo-Pakistan scenario, yes, Pakistan has tried to use more and more drones, swarms. We also utilize the way Akash Tir has been considered, that is using L-70 guns, Jadu-23 guns, Strela, Akash missiles, and only utilizing S-400, the topmost missile, and the radars locking systems which you have got, only for strategic targets. That should continue. As of now, drones cannot wage a decisive battle. Yes, how to counter that? This Bhargavastra, which we are designing by using short-range laser weapons, which do not require big power source. The biggest problem with the laser weapons is the power source which is required, and that in field areas it is difficult to obtain, and instantly. So the small level laser weapons, then in a other firepower guns must be employed, and probably one odd special weapon like the LMGs or HMGs, which can go up to 2000 meters aerially. They must be provided, given more stability and optical tracking. When you track optically, you keep homing to the target rather than firing in the wilderness. These will be more required. That is what I feel.
Colonel, typical infantryman that you are, you will always tend to disagree that infantry still has the best foot forward. While that is there, we also see a comment that came in from the Air Chief, who said that there are delays in defense procurement. Orders given to, especially to Indian PSUs, defense PSUs, do not turn up in time. I'm sure in terms of the army part of it, whichever you're speaking of, in terms of the army must be getting their missiles and all that. Ordnance Board have been collapsed into 8 now, and hopefully their efficiency has gone up. We haven't got any reports regarding that. But the main problem seems to be lying with the Air Force for their aircraft, which includes Tejas, then Tejas upgraded version, and then ACMAs and others that are coming up. Do you think our private sector now has to step up and fulfill the need which earlier was being filled by the likes of HAL and BE. And not that they're not doing a good job, they're doing a good job. But deadlines being deadlines are not met. And when deadlines are not met, whatever comes out becomes obsolete in no time. What do you say, sir?
Yes, the government also seems to be on the same lines. They are trying to encourage. Tatas have gone in for limited manufacture. Reliance, that is Reliance Group, the younger one group,
Yes, correct.
probably tried, but they did not venture out
Adani
so far.
is in it.
Adani, yes, he has gone into drones in a big way. But certainly the fundamental research being carried out and trying to invent an aircraft is too time consuming. DRDO, yes, what he said is right. I slightly enlarge it. DRDO does not have the fire in the belly. They could not produce even basic infantry weapon systems, then tactical communication systems for a section and a platoon level usage. There's no doubt about it. While these communications or Tatas and others can do it, but collaborations are required. Now for collaborations, yes, a day before yesterday, US Commerce Secretary is very candid in his expression. He said, you are going to Russians for your defense technology and equipment. So obviously we are going to hit you back, or to the worst to that effect. That means he is expecting us to purchase his F-35s at whatever cost he dictates.
And F-35 itself is a big doubt.
Big doubt. And probably we might go in for F-21 or even F-18 to some extent, or even F-16 old outcast
To keep the Americans
dice,
happy.
They can all come. But we must ask for transfer of technology. As part of Japan, Australia, UK and USA collusion, India,
Quad
formation, we must demand this technology. Because India is the only country which can contain China by land route. No other country can. They have to come by the sea route, and the aerial route is very difficult because they don't have bases nearby. And India is the only country which can really help. So using that leverage, we must ask for the technology, we must ask for joint collaborations. And even if it is Russians, suppose if they are giving us Su-57 technology with a transfer and a manufacturing facility, we must accept it. We must still.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, Colonel. When China is an unknown quantity, they don't open out their entire defense sector and saying we're making X, Y, Z, just like US does, for example. Okay, their supermarket, their defense supermarket is pretty open in terms of what you can offer and what you can buy and what you cannot buy. But China is an unknown quantity. Their fighter aircraft we saw being sold to Pakistan, which now is not getting any aircraft from the US, and they cannot afford any European aircraft like what we bought from Rafale and others. The question obviously arises is, what is China up to? Because we are not sure whether they are upgrading, whether they are coming to the next level, because China has technically not fought a war for the last 40, 50 years. They had a small skirmish with Russia, but apart from that, they have not fought a war. So what is China as a threat? Because we saw a confidential document from the US intelligence, which said that Pakistan is not a bigger threat to India. It is China that is a bigger threat to India. So do you think we need to recalibrate our approach to, this 2.5 front war that General Bipin Rawat had spoken about?
Certainly, even we say that China is a bigger enemy and Pakistan is no longer an enemy. It is just a hindrance to our development because they are using religion more than the armies, their armies. Now, China is going to remain communist and they can dictate their budgets. They can be secretive, while India will remain a democracy. And like USA, we have to go by the capitalist way. Obviously, democracy encourages capitalism only. So private sector has to pitch in a lot. Of course, rules, regulations have to be framed the way USA does for transfer of technology or collaborations, etc. Now, I always said that even in 2020, when they did the skirmishes in Ladakh sector, China is only experimenting their war capability, that is right from political decision making to command level, their command level at Lanzhou, then the local divisional and corps equivalent formations, and the lower level for units into a battle which they can get only with India, because India is the only viable enemy for them. They were testing against India, how to react, how India will react, how they react further. This they were testing. Once the testing was done, they kept quiet. Now that is how they are coming into that peace mode.
So they're not
But
making any noise. now.
yes, because they whatever they wanted to test limited, they tested it. Now Pakistan is giving them bigger opportunity because they can test missiles, they can test nuclear submarines, they can test ships also, they can test aircraft, and that is why they are hastening up the 30 odd the J-35's delivery by August. That is what I'm heard, and which is nearly impossible given the industry scale. Even Boeing probably cannot manufacture that scale. That means they are giving from their inventory, probably their alpha, beta, gamma versions.
They're pushing it into the market.
They are testing them. And unless this another testing is done, they won't even venture into Taiwan. That is what I personally feel.
So Taiwan is a bigger problem.
Bigger problem, because the topmost weaponry of the world will come onto them. So they are going to test this F-35, J-35 also via Pakistan. And that is what I personally feel. Yes, our main enemy is China, and we must cater for it. What we are forgetting these days is the war has become totally diffused. It is covering all spectrum of civil, actually human life, cyber warfare, then info warfare, then your banking, financial warfare. Now, till now, it is only we have seen only trade being stopped or tariffs being imposed. Electricity grid. Then, if you remember, 2-3 years back, SBI had to reissue 8 million cards or so, debit cards, because the complete data was compromised. Obviously, 8 million is not a small number, more than the population of almost 100 countries. So that was actually China which tested against India. And the Chinese mobiles, Chinese electronics which come into India, they also play. They are going to be like what Israel has done, Chinese can do against us.
The mobile.
And they have already got 2 to 3 information warfare battalions raised and working in Shanghai with the IT sector in civil uniform. That is basically the collaboration between the civil non-uniformed personnel waging war is also increasing.
This brings me that interesting point, Colonel, that today's army, the usual recruitment that we do is we bring in, I'm not decrying them, but a Jawan's education level is pretty low. Okay, and then as it increases, NDA and then OT, Officers Training Academy, and then various formations that come into finally being. And for the Air Force, it's through the Air Force academies in Hyderabad. The point is now that youngsters have to use, we need youngsters with technical knowledge who can use these technologies to counter drones, counter missiles, fire drones. All this brings into the point that do we need to retrain, or rather the recruitment procedure, be it Agniveer or others, need to change now to ensure that we take in more technically qualified people, especially at the operational level, at the junior operational level.
Yes, to some extent, it is correct. The change must be there. Around 40% must be highly technically qualified people. But the problem with the technically qualified people is they don't come into the services because they get better pay, emoluments, and the free life outside compared to the disciplined life of armed forces. Now, I'll use another analogy to counter this. Most weight loss programs tend to tell you to eat more protein, less fat, and less carbohydrate, and work more.
True.
But most doctors advise you to still have 70% carbohydrate, only 15 to 20% protein, and probably around 5% fat, and with other minerals and all. So it has to be an ideal combination like that. The basic armed forces will have to remain. They have to guard the borders. They have to they have to protect the land. They have to occupy the land. And physically, casualties have to occur. There's no doubt about it. If you have to,
no war is cheap.
Actually. Yeah. Now, 15% of the protein which you are speaking about, the technology portion of it, has to be also done. Now that 5% fat, which I will mention it here itself, also has to be done because most weight loss effort to making people tend to ignore fat. But that fat is also required. That is, fat I consider in these terms of special operations, which Ukraine has done. Yesterday morning, they had blown up the bridge which connects Crimea from
Correct.
Kherson, which is the third time it has happened. It is not the first time. And they had used an underwater drone to deliver approximately 1.1 ton or 1.2 tons of explosives. That is the
Huge.
explosive required. Now, Bin Laden has done it in 2001 itself. Used aircraft fuel as a weapon.
That's true.
So, Ukraine has also done demolition of bridges where trains got impacted. Now, this is dirty war. India, by being Sanatan Dharma proponent, whatever it is, 15,000-year-old civilization, whether it is being secular or Hindutva or everything, the basic psyche is basically adharma, it doesn't follow. That 5% adharma also has to be done. Probably we have started a little bit. We don't know whether it is ISI doing or somebody else doing it. The unknown man behavior in Pakistan, that is also required. Suppose if we are able to knock off the top 3 leaders, which we are wanting.
Israel does it very well.
Israel does it. But if you remember, I personally feel Gaza population is not more than 22 lakhs. Had they done the coordinate search operations the way we advocate, that is, cordon every village, these 52 odd hostages which are still being held by Hamas, they would have come out.
Like what you do in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yes, exactly.
Colonel,
So, all this mixture is required. Yes, technological tilt is going to happen, but that is probably 23% the way Earth probably takes a tilt to maintain
in fact, this during the DGMO's press conferences that we saw with the Air Force and of course Navy heads also, one of the things that was often asked about, was being spoken about, is the training that has worked this time. So be it using your anti-aircraft guns at the very, very basic level to the S-400s, which you bought from Russia. Training is a year-long, lifelong process in the army. You know it better than me. Do you think now that training has really worked? Now do we need to kind of again rewrite our training manuals to bring these new weaponry into the fore and train more youngsters or Jawans at the lower level and even at the JCO level to kind of adapt to these new technologies? The training methodologies also have to change in the Army, Air Force and Navy?
Yes, certainly. And I think it is already happening. I happened to visit an infantry battalion 2 months back.
Okay.
I was shown 2 types of drones which they are operating.
You don't want to name the location anyway, I know that.
No, I was just telling, that means it is happening. But yes, more integration has to happen, more training has to be given, and the curriculum also probably has to change from the normal commando operations which we do, which the commando trained people do. That also has to go more technical. The technical people also have to be involved in the special operations. This, yes, over a time it takes change, and it is probably happening. India has already realized, and we should do more and more. Integrating the services, that is also more important.
The theaters,
many a times,
the theater command.
May not be really theater commands, because see what happens is theater commands are okay when we are having the static battles only with China borders or Pakistan borders. Now suppose after some time we must look for 2047. When you look at 2047, the Jawan who is being recruited now, he will reach the senior Jawan level or JSO level positions. So he must be adequately knowledgeable and encouraged in this. By that time, my opinion is that probably we will take the position of forward front for USA or Western powers against China. We might become a superpower. And then our borders are going to be not Himalayas and Sindh River. We might be operating in North Africa, South America, anywhere.
In fact, I think I saw a remark from CDS also the other day, which said that we cannot push upward because China is there. We need to go downward because we can control the Indian Ocean.
Yes.
So that means obviously the Blue Water Navy comes into effect. Of course, the aircraft carriers come into effect, and also the Indian Air Force to a limited extent having their aircraft in smaller islands in different countries happen. But Colonel, as we close this conversation that we're having, the obvious fact that has come out now is that technology now dominates warfare. It had to happen. With every other sector, technology is dominating now. And it is not that the traditional modes have gone out. The infantry still matters. The boots on the ground are important. The tanks are still there. And the guns, the big guns, okay, the Bofors-like guns, they are still required, field guns. And of course, the most important is the man behind the machine or the woman behind the machine. But when you look at, now that you're retired and you can sit back and say, this is what actually we need to do for the next, you spoke of 2047 somewhere, that this is what we need to do, planning 30 years in advance or 10 years in advance or 20 years in advance, we need to have certain milestone changes in the way the Indian Armed Forces operate. What is your closing comments?
See, one of the loose thought process which I was making, gleaned from various media, is basically why not develop a halfway between destroyer, or make it a destroyer into a UAV carrier. I think one of these, China or somebody, is already doing it. Okay. Somebody else has done a huge airship which carries many drones and leaves it in the arena. So innovative technologies are coming. So firstly, we must invest in such futuristic technologies through various think tanks, of course, then for strategy, then that being conveyed to the research institutions of IITs or whatever it is. Then the factories putting into that innovation into practice on ground,
so lab to market that we talk of.
This must be done. Then coming to the armed forces per se, theater commands are a welcome this thing, but then it will take time. It will take at least a decade plus to fully integrate. And then cultural differences are the biggest ones to overcome rather than the technical issues. Technical issues, we are already integrated, fully integrated. Now what comes is the training curriculum, that cross training must take place in a larger way to give a futuristic outlook. So I'll give a small example in this, how it can be done. Earlier there was a forward air controller who used to be deployed on something known as with the infantry in the forwardmost line, okay, to see enemy aircraft coming and direct own aircraft fighting with this thing.
So he'll be conveying,
he'll be conveying to
the
own base, air base, to say that now you tackle him, this is the target which is coming. Or when you want to do a ground operation, air to ground operation, you do beyond this line, this is the target, and he keeps directing there. Now this can be an infantryman himself.
Sure.
By training with Air Force, he can recognize the aircraft. He can say this is the aircraft, whether it is going, coming, sideways, whatever, or it is a drone, or the ground target, what weapon must be used, whether it is a bunker bursting bomb, whether it is a laser bomb, what guidance can be used. You can use laser guidance systems. All these things can be done. So technology is certainly having a change in the modern warfare. And the more we innovate, the more enemy can be controlled easily. And of course, we must try one more thing, that is not but the least, the political influence which people are making, the way USA has done in Bangladesh. Okay. Even that can be done.
So go beyond the borders.
Go beyond the borders.
And that's true. That US does it very well, actually. Very well. The CIA has done it, yes, from Vietnam to Somalia to Iraq to Afghanistan. They messed up every place, Libya, yes, Syria, everywhere. Colonel V.V. Rao, wonderful talking to you. And I'm sure our viewers also had given a lot of comments in the last part of the telecast that we had. And I'm sure as we go forward, we will look at various other aspects of war and, of course, the way we have to adapt to the changing circumstances. Thank you for speaking to us, sir. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Colonel V.V. Rao, who spoke to us about how the scenario of war has changed and what we need to do to keep pace with it. Training, newer methodologies, and of course, we need people with experience too. All that matters. Thank you for watching. Jai Hind.